computer. All right, we're ready to go. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Jana Walser Smith, Director of Interstate Compliance and Member Outreach here at SAN. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Sean Fields. Sean is from Post University, located in lovely Waterbury, Connecticut. Post University is the 2024 recipient of the Sensational Award in the category of licensure programs. So, Post University dazzled the awards community with their project titled Maintaining Databases in Support of Personalized Student Licensure Advising. But before we get into the details of the Post University project, please allow me the latitude to explain just some brief details about the Sensational Awards. Just keep in mind that the Sensational Awards were born in 2015 as an annual award to recognize the outstanding efforts by sustaining member institutions and organizations affiliated with SAN when they have developed high quality, comprehensive solutions to these challenging distance education compliance issues. Thus, SAN applauds the creativity and vision that these organizations show when helping to address some of these regulatory issues. Um, when we think about these projects, they typically are projects that underscore the fact that the institution or the organization understands the state and federal regulatory requirements because they show that they have conceptualized and put into effect processes that are in place on their respective campuses to mobilize their campuses as it relates to communications and the development of procedures designed to support their learners. So it is without further ado that I introduce you all to Mr. Sean Fields. Sean, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting today. I'd like to also thank SAN in general for providing this kind of forum where people in the business can share information with each other and help support each other. As you know, it's a very complicated world we live in these days in
Exactly.
higher ed. And we'd also like to thank the Sensational Award Committee for taking the time to look at what we're doing and affirming that we've got some good stuff going on. So thanks to all of you.
Of course.
Um, Post University is a private proprietary school. We've been around since 1890. As Jana mentioned, we are based in Waterbury, although the majority of our students are online. We have students all over the world, or in many places in the world, I should say, to be regulatory compliant. Um, and right now we're around 20,000 students. We have four different schools. There's currently 58 programs, soon to be more, everywhere from undergrad certificates all the way up to the doctoral level. And, when we first started looking at a licensure advising program way back in 2019, we got asked the question quite frequently, why do you want to do this? If the federal and other governing entity requirements are that a disclosure be sent, why would we go into taking further steps, basically? Why would we kind of amp up beyond what the requirements state? And there's two reasons. Post has a tenet that we take very seriously, and it's Post makes it personal. And so we want to make sure that every student that's involved in a licensure program, especially before they matriculate, fully understands their path to licensure and how a specific program will impact their career choices. So that's one thing. The second thing is obviously, as I mentioned, there's regulation about making sure that the students understand how your programs relate to licensure We find that it's such a complicated process. We have so many first gen students, especially first gen to grad school, students that don't understand what a profession really means. You're kind of joining a guild and there's requirements beyond, just getting a degree and going and getting a job that we really wanted to make sure that they were having personalized conversations with us and knew that they had support beyond their completion of their program with us. So we were identifying student issues in 2019. Obviously, there were regulatory changes coming up over the next couple of years. We launched with our counseling enrollments. Now we have four different graduate counseling programs. And so basically, we started talking to them again before they matriculate, laying out a plan for them, confirming the plan of study in conjunction with other departments, being available for them while they are enrolled, letting them know if their state is changing anything rule-wise while they are engaged in our programs. And then as they get to the point of graduating, reaching out to them and walking them through the filing process. So counseling was 2020. CPA and other various programs kind of came in 2021. We added nurse practitioner specializations. We merged with American Sentinel University in 22. And then we've really beefed up our training for post associates in all departments to make sure how they can best service students by kind of pointing them to our materials and to our team. And so to kind of break down how we look at our programs and what our students might try to do with them, we've got three categories. One, full-on licensure programs, right? These are the ones that the feds are requiring you to make disclosures about. There's a middle category, the sort of the second tier down, which is the CPA kind of falls into this. You can't fulfill the educational requirements for a CPA with any one program, but clearly people want to obtain a license with that.
Exactly.
At times, and you got to figure out how to advise them. The state regulations are pretty complicated in a lot of these states, so making sure they're taking the right courses, especially after they finished a bachelor's degree that might not be in accounting is really important. We don't have teacher certification programs, but a lot of folks will look at our education programs at any level and say, "Oh, I want to be a certified teacher," and we want to make sure that they understand, that this probably isn't going to help them do that. Sometimes it does, but they're not full-on licensure programs. Law is another example. Criminal justice with people who want to be law enforcement officers is another example. Those aren't programs designed specifically to lead to a certification or license, but people are asking about it. And then sort of the lowest tier is, just programs that have nothing to do with that, esports and gaming and, MBA and that kind of thing. Professional credentials might be out there for them. And so we break down how much outreach we conduct and what procedures everybody has to follow based on which tier of program the student is looking at. So to give you an idea of our activity, this is on a calendar year. We are on a academic year of July through June, like many people, but we just like to look at it from a calendar perspective. Last year, we outreached over 1,700 students. That's just potential students, by the way, students considering attending post. We're responsible for checking all licensure related documents that go out to state agencies, and sometimes we'll sort of fill out those forms ourselves. So we dealt with 90 documents last year. We also assist departments like NP when you're going into clinical preceptorships. Some states require that you file for permission. So we dealt with 93 packages for notification or permission from different state agencies. Again, we're really involved in training the university at the sort of staff as a whole about this. So there's folks that are directly involved with the process, and then there's folks that are, might just casually encounter students who are asking questions about this. And we did a lot of training last year as well. So how we support this whole structure, being able to relate information to students and the public and to our faculty and staff, is through having a number of tracking sheets. So we actively monitor 725 different state credentials. And so those different spreadsheets that track all of that data. There's almost 23,000 data points on those alone. And to share that with faculty or admissions or something can be it's a little much for them. It's more detail than they are looking for. So we have separate sheets that are kind of simplified for them, and those have over 8,000 data points on them across the various sheets. We will provide updates on potential students to admissions and advising and to the faculty. And so those sheets will be broken down by term that a student is looking at matriculating into, and those will have anywhere from 11 to 73 categories in them, basically. So they can look quickly and see exactly where they're at in terms of the pipeline of incoming students. And then finally, we also, as I mentioned, are involved in students filing for licensure. We want to track who is successfully obtaining professional credentials and licenses, and what exams they took and passed and all that kind of stuff. So we have a separate set of sheets for that as well. And just to kind of show you what comes from this, some output. I don't want to put up a spreadsheet with thousands of data points on it, but you can see this is old text on here. We modify it all the time, but basically this is an example of the disclosure language that you would find on our programmatic web page or catalog page. And each licensure related program has a link towards the bottom where you can see a state by state breakdown of whether or not we meet the requirements, what are the requirements outside of education, how do you get in touch with the board, so on and so forth. Again, that's not necessarily updated information there. Um, so we do all this. We want to look at it from a perspective of, a support service always gets questioned around budget time if things are tight. Fortunately, Post has always done really well. So we don't have to worry about that too much. And we are very rarely increase student tuition. So, but we want to be conscious of what we're expending on something because that is coming out of student pockets. So we look at how do we monitor all this data without breaking the bank? Well, we use software that we already have. So all of these tracking sheets that I'm referring to are through Excel, Microsoft Excel. We actively use Teams so that, for example, faculty can go into the team for, let's say, nurse practitioner specializations in the MSN. They can see each one of these sheets. We'll also email updates every night to stakeholders for the real first tier licensure related programs. And then as a sort of a university system for students, we use anthology products. So student is where we uh, can share some information, if we need transfer credit evaluations, we do it through there. But also we use their CRM system where every single interaction that we have with students is recorded in that system. So any user of that system can go in and see what's happening. So to kind of summarize the process for the data part of this, we try to make sure that we're fully vetting the state sites, statutes, regulations, rules, forms, other postings once every 6 months at least. And then before every single student conversation, we do a spot check to make sure that our cheat sheet, if you will, is not outdated already. And I've been on, board pages that they were changing while you were looking at it. So we're paranoid about making sure that students get the absolute correct information when they speak with us. Um, the public facing documents that we have, if we discover that there is a rule change or something we want to update in regards to the status of our program, then we'll do that almost immediately. And I mentioned CRM and student from Anthology. And then the tracking sheets, those are updated after every single interaction. So we'll have a conversation with a student. The conversation notes go into CRM. We'll send them a follow-up email that goes into CRM. We'll update the tracking sheet, and then that's emailed out to admissions advising and the faculty later on that day. So again, the benefits of having it set up this way, it's expensive. We're not pulling on the budget really to do this other than the staff expenses. It's everybody is already familiar with Excel and Teams and these systems at our university. So there's an ease of use that, these are simple systems to use. There's also an ease of understanding, and that again, we're not introducing anything new to them. And we have supporting documentation. The great majority of our students are fantastic scholars and they're doing wonderful things in their professions. But, as a university, you got a lot of people that, um, may not understand what university is about and might have issues down the road. And sometimes they look for some folks to blame for that, right? So, if someone doesn't have the best intentions with their enrollment, we certainly want to help them, but we also need to be able to defend ourselves. And so this provides us with supporting documentation. So, for example, when we have a conversation, after that conversation, we send a disclosure for the student to read and sign. That goes through Dropbox Sign. We take that, we have it downloaded in a couple different places. We have um, a OneDrive site where we keep it internally for the team, and then we also load it up into student as well. And so sometimes there's holds and things on registration. And so that document clears that hold. So we just have a comprehensive way to service the students and then also, protect the integrity of the process in the university. And so who does all this? Well, you'll see Jana there. She visits us and gives us encouragement and advice sometimes. And the rest of us and myself on the left, and then Melissa Palois and Chrissy Adamchek and Brianna Torres Martinez. Just the four of us handle all of that. And there's other activities not related to the licensure process that we're involved in as well. And so that concludes my overview of our data process to support our student licensure advising.
Sean, you've been so modest because you've given me credit where credit is not due. In fact, love going up to Waterbury as Post has won an award 2 years consecutively. And so the picture depicts me coming up and congratulating the Post team, which is a phenomenal team. So that's going to get me to one of my first questions for you. I've met your team and I know the dynamics of the team. I know that you've got a new addition to the team, Brianna. I
Mhm.
think she's joined the team within the last, what, 6 months, maybe?
No, she's closing in on a year now. Yeah,
Okay,
just
okay.
after you visited the last time, she
She
started.
started.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, great. So that's one of my questions that I want you to explain to these viewers. How do you manage? How do you divide this workload? There's a four-person, pretty much. You've got a four-person team. Talk to us about how you divide and conquer all of these touch points that you guys advise on.
Yeah, the challenge for us is so we have a main campus, we have different various online schools and programs, and so there are different academic schedules going on. So we have 20 different starts
Okay.
throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we're about to get into a start, obviously there's a flurry of activity uh, the weeks leading up to that, the week of, and then of course as people are graduating, they want to file paperwork and things right away. So we have to make sure we're not taking time off, right
Mm-hmm.
before, say, in the midst of a start there, which can be challenging with a small team and that many starts. But essentially, we try to make sure that everybody is cross-trained because I have a couple of really veteran people, and Post is really generous with time off. We call it PTO. And so, we need to make sure that if someone's going to be out on PTO or, people have had babies and things like that, they're going to be out
Mm-hmm.
for a while, that we have the ability to cover, on sort of a temporary basis. So everybody's cross-trained. However,
Perfect.
we
Mm-hmm.
find that students really like to make individual connections. And I'll
Okay.
have students that still graduated years ago and contact me to let me know how things are going because we made a connection, right? And so
Mhm.
because Post makes it personal, we kind of want to have, if possible, each licensure conversation between a student and a credentialing specialist happen with the same credentialing specialist.
Right.
So we sort of have them specialize, and it just also offers some efficiencies in terms of preparations that, okay, we're going to call counseling students, and you know, Florida today, well, I can prepare for Florida and kind of knock out a bunch of them in a row. Um,
Hmm.
and so Melissa focuses on CPA, any accounting issues, and then kind of catches a lot of other miscellaneous things, teaching English language learners, education in general, law, criminal justice, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
A lot of those programs that aren't, really full licensure programs, but people inquire about it. Again, at that tier, we want to make sure that a student doesn't think that a degree is going to lead directly into that. They just don't, again, they don't even understand the process. They
Hmm.
think, I'm going to
Hmm.
finish and I'm going to be a teacher, right? And you're like, no, there's more to it than
More.
that.
Right.
Um, so she focuses on a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
Chrissy Adamczyk deals primarily with the nurse practitioner specialization students. Um, NP work is complex and that the states have various positions on independent practice slash collaborative agreement and prescriptive authority and that kind of thing. So these are already licensed nurses, but
Okay.
they're punching it up a level, and
Right.
there's a degree of complexity there that you need somebody who really knows what they're talking about. And then Brianna uh, predominantly speaks with the counseling students. And we'll
Okay.
have a lot of folks that are asking about, social work and school counseling and things that aren't, directly related to something like clinical mental health counseling or alcohol and drug counseling. And so she fields a lot of those. And so the idea is that those wonderful associates do the potential student outreach, they answer questions throughout, they deal with updating the tracking sheets and so forth. I will handle all, like Brianna, for example, will prep the students for, okay, here's what you're going to do to file. And then when they start sending their forms to us, if there's anything we need to complete, I take that and do it. And so we have wonderful partners in the registrar's office in which, they'll field a lot of forms as well. NP, for example, they kind of complete their portion, send it to faculty, and then it'll go to me before it gets submitted. There's faculty involved in other departments there as well. So I kind of deal with any complicated stuff that comes up. If there's a specific problem or it's a tricky situation as everybody involved in this process knows, like you can advise them about what the conditions are when they start, but if a state changes their regulations while they're enrolled or they move states, we don't necessarily have to be a yes to that license and state anymore, but the student needs to be advised. And so
Hmm.
sometimes students can get upset about, because again, they just don't get the whole thing. They think, oh, I'm going to have a license and it'll work everywhere and that kind of thing. We have to try to teach them that's not the case.
Really,
And so
yeah.
I'll deal with a lot of the challenging stuff like that, or
Hmm.
working with other departments to make sure things are going smoothly,
Hmm.
faculty admissions advising, that kind of thing. And we let the faculty know too, like, okay, a state is asking for this now.
Hmm.
If you want to be able to meet these requirements, you're going to need to cover X, Y, and Z. And then it's up to them to decide if they're going to do that or not. And then we adjust, the public facing materials accordingly. So that's kind of how we have it broken down. Yeah.
So when I was up a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that we talked about, and I thought it was interesting because at another institution I worked with, they did kind of the same thing. You kind of manage the quality control as far as talking to state agencies or state regulators. I think you've relegated those duties for yourself. Is that correct?
So post published policy is actually I am the only one who's authorized to speak with those state agencies, and we do that for a couple of reasons. One, um, our faculty are incredible. They're really busy. We want them focused on, the quality of their programs and giving that personal touch to students. And so I call it kind of it's not really mundane, but like mundane paperwork type
Right.
stuff. I don't want to use their expertise on filling out a form if we don't have to. Uh, Also, we want to make sure that there's checks and balances to the system. So when we make a decision about whether or not we meet the requirements for a state or what a state is even asking for, there are several people laying eyes on that. We don't do anything within the team without a couple people looking at it. We have a fantastic support system with Tom Bryan is the vice president of accreditation, who I work for. Kimber Summers is his boss. She's the chief regulatory officer and general counsel, and there's tons of other people too that will go to and say, okay, are we all seeing the same thing? Sometimes faculty get really passionate about a student's case, if you will, or their profession, and that passion may lead them to have a different conversation with a state agency than I would have.
Okay.
So for all intents, like I don't care what their position is. I care
Right.
like what is the state asking for, and then we're going to do that kind of thing. So we make sure that I'm doing that so that there can be sort of a buffer between somebody's own passions and individual thoughts and like okay, this is the university's official position. The third reason that we do it that way is again, we really do believe in those personal connections. And so because I'm the one that reaches out or hears back from these state agencies, we get to know the folks, and we
Mm-hmm.
we learn what they like and what they don't like and how we can help them. We know of state agencies where there's two people doing the handling the paperwork for 15 different boards and stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
a crazy amount of work on a lot of these folks. And unfortunately, people aren't the kindest when they reach out to them always. So we try to
It's quality
manage the,
control too.
well, yeah, we don't want our
Hmm.
students calling up and just
Right.
asking silly questions and then like there's that saying there's no such thing as a silly question. Yeah, there are. In these conditions, like if a board has something posted and then you're calling them and saying, how do I do this? Well, it's posted. So we try to manage that so that the agencies can spend the important time that the limited time that they have doing the work of actually processing the real paperwork and getting it done, and we know that they appreciate that
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
have boards refer students to us and things because we pay attention to their needs and the needs of the students and work really hard to try to help people get licensed if we can. So that's that arrangement.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Appreciate that. So, if I were an institution wanting to implement some of these things, and, this is a system that it's got a lot of teeth, all these touch points you talk about, all of these, research points that you guys do. Talk to me about how you would advise another institution who wanted to implement a system like this. Where would you recommend that they start?
You have to have the support of the institutional leadership. Poe's commitment to regulatory compliance is second to none. And I've worked at a bunch of different schools and other organizations. Like we are obsessed with regulatory compliance. So they are all in favor of making sure that every single tiny little rule is followed at all times. And then also there our commitment to students, like I said, we take it really seriously. Post makes it personal. We want, even though we're online and the great majority of our programs are asynchronous as well, we want students to feel a connection to us. We want to feel like they're an individual and not a number. We want to feel
Mhm.
like that they're really getting the assistance that they're paying for, the guidance and knowledge and expertise. And so you have to have that commitment from the top all the way through. And our associate experience group in our Eagle Institute, which is like the training wing of that, does a fantastic job of inculcating people into the culture of Post
Okay.
and making sure that we're all looking at that like it's very atypical that it's desiloed in many ways. You're going to have a lot of groups involved in working with students, admissions, advising, financial aid, credentialing, the faculty. Like no one group gets to decide what's happening. Like you've all got to work together to make this happen, and so that's pretty unique. And again, that only happens if it's top down and then also bottom up.
Bottom up.
And
Okay.
so you have to have that full on commitment from everybody to really be able to pull this off. Otherwise, you're just constantly fighting your own crew basically
Hmm.
about what's
Hmm.
supposed to happen. And the challenging part to it is that students are so easily confused about these things, and that's not an indictment on their intelligence or anything. It's just that this stuff is really complicated, as you know, if you work in the field. Like you can look at a board, set of regulations and say, "What?" Like the statute doesn't match the regulation, and then they're posting something different on the application form, and it's confusing. And our students are um, single parents and working multiple jobs and taking care of
Hmm.
family members and all of these
Hmm.
things, and that they don't have the time to break down every single little component of these things to try to figure it out. And so um, you need that total commitment to make sure that you can meet the students where they are and not make them come to you, if that makes sense.
Right, right. I think the strength of Post is that mantra. Post makes it personal because nothing is. It's so true. When I'm there and I hear it in the passion from your entire team, you all are definitely in the business of making sure that these students can be successful. So, Post is an institution, a university that all institutions strive to emulate because you guys have got it down to a science as it relates to, again, making sure that your learners can be successful. So, again, our hats are off to you there at Post.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, this will conclude the recorded session. I'm sure questions will come in. We'll get those questions and gather those and get them over to you, Sean. So, again, we appreciate you. We celebrate you. Thank you for sharing your innovative processes with the same community. We
Thank you so
appreciate you.
much. Yeah, thank you for hosting and for all of your support all throughout the year.
Of course, of course.